2D side-scrollers are a genre that always bring back good memories of my childhood. While he didn't play video games himself, as an artist and action buff, my dad often sat with me watching and enjoying the art design, humour and carnage that often came with such games. Metal Slug probably being the best generator of his laughter. So when I do on the rare occasion get to cover a 2D side-scrolling game, it is an opportunity I wholeheartedly jump into, both for reasons of nostalgia and to see what new and interesting ideas modern game design can bring to such a legendary genre. And Creepy Road was one game I couldn't refuse. Creepy Road is a 2D side-scrolling shooter developed by Groovy Milk and published alongside Grab the Games, and released on Steam for PC and Mac on May 18th, 2018. Creepy Road has an outstanding cartoon art design, excellent atmosphere and creative enemy design, but what positivity those aspects bring are ruined by the rushed, buggy and poorly designed gameplay. You take on the role of Flint Trucker, a truck driver who is on his way home after a long trip delivering a load to its destination. Flint is driving along and looking forward to seeing his beloved Angelina, a panda trainer of a circus that is having its final show in his hometown, when suddenly a bear jumps out at his hauler, causing him to crash. After waking up from the incident, he takes out his revolver and begins the long journey home on foot through the woods. But something is wrong. The animals are extremely hostile and attacking Flint on sight, just as the bear did when it attacked his truck. What has happened to the normal woodland animals that they've become so aggressive? The only way to find out is to press on and get home. The plot to Creepy Road is a decent one, even if not all that original. It starts off as a mystery, but you quickly find out what happened and who is responsible for the goings on, and naturally your aim is to stop them. The story is short and is stretched out a bit through the mid-section of the game, but it is well written and the comic book style art design for the cutscenes is awesome. There is a slight problem where the on-screen writing during cutscenes does not match up with the narrator, but that is not uncommon in games that are made by developers where English isn't their first language. But it isn't an issue that ruins anything. The voice acting of the narration is well done and fits the personality of the characters that are narrating at the time. Overall the plot is okay. It doesn't get any points for originality, but it is well written and very well voice acted, while the comic book's style art design of the cutscenes is nothing short of fantastic. The gameplay to Creepy Road is what you'd expect of a 2D side-scroller. You move to the right of the screen, killing anything that moves and avoiding hazards while attempting to reach the end of the level. To help you on your way, there is an array of weapons to use against the many different types of enemies you will encounter. The first is the weak and infinite revolver that is only really useful as a fallback weapon when you have no others. Then there is the shotgun, a powerful weapon up close, but its range is very limited. The flamethrower makes short work of pretty much any enemy, but its ammunition is limited and you can't shoot up with it. The bazooka can take out several enemies at once within close proximity of each other, but again very limited on ammunition. Next is the AK-47, which deals decent damage and has alright ammo counts, and can be fired in all directions. The Gatling gun is the biggest disappointment of weapons, as it is horrible to use and often useless in the circumstances it is designed for. The reason for this is because you can't run while the Gatling gun is equipped. You move at literally a snail's pace, while very fast enemies are moving in on you nearly constantly, both from the sides and attacking from the air. The weapon also takes time to rotate before firing, leaving you vulnerable for a few seconds. What happens because of this is you can't avoid the enemy's attacks from the air, and by the time the weapon starts firing, the ground enemies are already on top of you. What should be one of the most destructive and fun weapons in the game is easily the worst. The final two weapons are definitely the most creative of them. The first is the power glove that works very similar to that of Rayman's glove attack. It's extremely weak with damage, but it has some serious knockback, making it useful only when you need some breathing space. Then there is the Hypno Shit gun, which I'm sure you can guess is a weapon that quite literally turns enemies into swirling piles of shite. It is a fun weapon, but one that's novelty wears off very quickly. The weapons, with the exception of the power glove and Hypno Shit, are pretty bog standard, which is a shame for a game that has had so much creativity and imagination put into it. I would have loved to see some crazy weapons to fit in with the madness and chaos of the world. Not to mention the weapons don't have enough ammunition, and I often found myself running out and resorting to using the revolver in unfair circumstances. While on the subject of weapons, there are problems with the hit detection. Levels often have cars and other obstructions that you and the enemies need to jump onto to continue moving across the map. If an enemy is even the slightest bit above you, it misses them completely, even with a shotgun. And sometimes bullets are supposed to go through an object when attacking an enemy and they don't, while other times they will at random. The controls for the keyboard aren't too bad and are responsive, but a controller would definitely be the better choice. There is no option to change the key bindings for the keyboards, so you're stuck choosing between two control layouts. It makes the changing of the weapons with the number keys awkward, as when enemies are swarming towards you, you need to take either your hand off the movement keys or the other off the attacking keys to switch them. While with a controller you'd be able to still move and attack while using top bumper buttons to change your weapon. So the controls of the keyboard are responsive but finicky, and there's no option to change the key bindings to fix this, which is disappointing. And then there is the camera, which is the biggest thorn in the player's side with Creepy Road. The reason for this is that it's just too zoomed in on Flint at all times. This means that you don't get the time to react to enemies coming on screen, and those that attack from a range can damage you before you even see them. Because of this, the player can't see what enemies are coming and you are being killed before you get a chance to defend yourself. And this becomes even more frustrating the further in the game you go, as you can't move the camera up or down to see if there is anything above you before climbing or below you before jumping down. There are only two reasons I can think of for the camera to be like this. The first is that it is a bug in the programming that wasn't detected before release. The second is that it is intentionally done to make the game harder. I would rather have a game that is piss easy and enjoyable than one that frustrates me with unfair gameplay to the point I just want to quit and never return. And that is ultimately what ended up happening after I'd gotten about halfway through the game. At the start, this camera problem isn't too bad. It's frustrating, but you can deal with it. But when tougher enemies start coming in later, especially the riot cops who throw grenades that take out 95% of your health in one hit, it becomes unbearable. The camera also makes using grenades and molotovs frustrating, as when you throw them they go out of range of it, so you're guessing where they're going to land and if there are even enemies there for them to kill. So yes, the camera just simply ruins any positivity and fun that the gameplay does have. The sound of the game also has problems. Every time an enemy comes onto the screen, a line is activated depending on the enemy type it is. When you have so many enemies coming on screen at once, they all talk over each other, becoming a jumbled mess that you can't understand. It would be much better if only one activated at a time as opposed to several, as the enemies wouldn't lose their vocal charm, nor would it be as painful to listen to. Enemies also have a distinctive death sound too, where they say something. Again, just like when they appear on screen, their death sound becomes grating as each enemy only has one. And because it is talking instead of just some dying grunt or groan, the novelty wears off really quickly. But it isn't just the enemies that have this problem, but Flint himself too. Every time he picks up a weapon, he says something that is unique to the weapon he is picking up. Like with the shotgun, he says, "Ooh, my baby," or the flamethrower, smells like roast chicken. When you're picking up these weapons several times in every level, more if you die, they've just become dull, boring and cringy as opposed to funny. This is exactly the reason why in games like Duke Nukem or Shadow Warrior, the character had various lines for the same weapon, or sometimes didn't say anything at all to avoid becoming frustrating like it is in Creepy Road. There are also problems with the sound volume. I found that the sound volume was drowning out the music, but as soon as I turned up the music, it began to drown out the sound. So you can't win either way. It's such a shame, as the soundtrack to the game is awesome and works really well with each level, while the voice acting of the enemies, despite the repetition and overlapping too, is well done. Enemies also sometimes get stuck in the terrain, especially when attempting to jump onto cars. They simply move too close to the car and become stuck and unable to jump. Along with that, there was one case where a wave of enemies was supposed to attack me, but none showed up. This resulted in me being unable to continue and having to start the level from the beginning to fix it, which was very annoying to say the least. While the gameplay does have a lot of problems, one of the highlights of the game is the enemies. Some are a bit boring like the standard human enemies, but then there are those that are more creative, like the pigs that attack you with lumps of ham, the cow with the other minigun, and the kamikaze pandas who shout "Banzai!" as they pop their balloon to drop down on top of you. As for the bosses of the game, they are huge and equally as well designed visually, and each have their humorous characteristics. Though like all the enemies, their attack patterns and AI are very basic, making them not very challenging, which is a bit disappointing. Overall, the gameplay to Creepy Road is a mess. While there is fun to be had, the many problems that the game has, especially that godforsaken camera, ruin it. It is such a shame, as the amount of work that has gone into the art design is fantastic, and it is all for nothing when the gameplay is so awful. It is just such a letdown, as it is a game that has the potential to be one of the most fun, humorous and imaginative 2D side-scrollers we have seen in years. As for the level design of the game, they are artistically impressive, as is everything with Creepy Road, but the camera issue stops you from really appreciating the level design for what it is, as you simply can't see the levels to their full extent. They are quite linear for the most part, with the exception of one level where you can choose two different directions to go, that being the third level. You can continue to go straight on the ground or climb the Ferris wheel and move along the hot air balloons. No matter which way you go, you do end up on the same path. But the choice is a nice little touch that I wished was more of in the game, as it adds an element of exploration that is missing from every other level. Admittedly, the levels are big, and there are checkpoints which help you to deal with dying often when you die of enemies hitting you off screen. But sadly there's only one checkpoint in each level, and the further you progress in the game, the bigger the gap is between the starting point and the mid-stage checkpoint. And this makes the already frustrating camera issue ever more agonising. The level design is okay, they are very linear and there is little exploration to them, which is a shame, as there are tons of potential for it. They are visually impressive and each level is completely unique, but other than that, they are quite a bland experience. Creepy Road is one of those games that is as exasperating to talk about as it is to play, and even more so to review. There is so much to like about the game, but there is also so much to hate about it. You have to love the cartoon art design, the comic book cutscenes, the enemy design, the soundtrack and all the funny and humorous moments throughout. But the gameplay along with the sound has so many problems and is so horribly designed that it stops you from enjoying and appreciating that of what is done well. It makes what should be one of the most fun 2D side-scrollers we've seen in years just dull and agonising to play. And with that, I give Creepy Road a 3 out of 10. At the end of the day, Creepy Road isn't the worst game ever made. It is just frustrating and poorly put together. Its issues are easy to fix, and if done, I'd be more than happy to give Creepy Road another go and even a re-review. But until then, it is definitely a title I cannot recommend.